privilege today of welcoming Riva Lasansky. She is going to be our moderator for the event. And with over 40 years in journalism, she is going to be the voice who is sharing with us today. So Riva, I will go ahead and hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Brittany, and thank you, Alignable, for having me. I'm very excited to take part in this presentation. So, tariffs are top of mind for nearly everyone these days. I know I'm hearing it a lot from small business owners. The uncertainty and the angst and the latest on again, off again tariff situation, and how the small business universe continues to react. So we're going to talk about that, and then we're going to share some solutions that entrepreneurs can use to adapt, survive, and thrive in this highly uncertain and constantly shifting economic landscape. To help us navigate everything today, Alignable CEO and co-founder Eric Groves, who I've known longer than I actually care to admit, and the Small Business Advocacy Council's president and co-founder Elliot Richardson have teamed up, offering their unique perspectives on the state of small business right now. Eric leads the largest networking platform for small businesses in North America, leveraging more than 20 years of experience helping entrepreneurs grow and thrive. Under Eric's leadership, Alignable has become a vital resource for small business owners, not only through its AI-powered platform that connects members with ideal customers and referral partners, but also by amplifying their voices through monthly surveys that spotlight economic challenges. And Elliot champions smart bipartisan policy reforms, to help small businesses thrive. A trusted voice among lawmakers and entrepreneurs alike, Elliot works to shape legislation on everything from tax relief to trade policy, ensuring small business owners have a seat at the table. So I'm really excited. Welcome, Eric and Elliot. And first, we're gonna kick it off talking about the landscape today. So we'll start with you, Eric. I know Alignable has teamed up with researchers at the Harvard Business School and MIT on the tariff issue. Can you share any fresh insights from that work?
Absolutely. Thanks, Riva. It's great to be here, and it's great to be here with Elliot to share some perspectives. At Alignable, we're constantly surveying small business owners, really to keep a real-time pulse on the economy. And the latest data that we're seeing is quite troubling. Today, 50% of business owners expect sales to drop because of tariffs. Now, if you just think back just 3 weeks ago, that was 44%. And back in January, that was 30%. So we're starting to see an acceleration of concern around that. And at the same time, 60% of business owners now fear that we're heading towards a recession. And 73% of business owners are earning less than this time last year. Industries that have been significantly hit by this include retail, travel, manufacturing, but pretty much everyone in the entire small business ecosystem is feeling the implications of these tariffs. We're now seeing how this rising uncertainty is impacting things like hiring. It's slowing investments being made by business owners and putting Main Street at real risk, much like we saw in 2020 with the COVID crisis.
Yeah, I've heard a lot from business owners. I'm writing an article about this right now, and no news is good. No one has said anything good
Right.
to say. So, Elliot, why are small businesses particularly vulnerable to trade policy volatility, and how is this impacting those businesses?
Yeah, let's start. First of all, thank you so much for having me. And Eric, right back at you. It's really wonderful to be on this webinar with you. And thanks for all you do for small businesses. Small businesses should not be the casualties of a trade war, which they have no part in starting and really cannot control. So let's start with uncertainty. Small businesses are being deeply impacted by the uncertainty revolving around the tariff policies. And for small businesses, certainty is everything. A small business starts its day, a small business owner, I should say, starts his day or her day. And there's going to be a degree of uncertainty just in your everyday work life when you're running a business. When you add to that shifting policies and tariff policies that seem to change on a daily basis, sometimes an hourly basis, it's very, very difficult to understand how to plan and to plan accordingly, right? And a business owner should be able to focus on their business and not have to check the news and social media 2 times a day to see how trade policy is going to impact them. So small business needs certainty. Small businesses are unequivocally going to pay these tariffs. And that is, at least on the imports, right? And that is going to really disproportionately impact small businesses that don't necessarily have the ability to absorb the margins that larger corporations are going to pay. So that bleeds into what happens to a small business that can't absorb margins and Riva have to pass those costs on to customers, right? Bigger corporations may be able to at least absorb lower margins for a time. Take craft brewers, right? You know, people love craft brewers right now, craft beer. However, if their margins continue to be impacted by tariffs, larger beer companies may be able to absorb those tariffs, right? And, you know, the question becomes, how much is somebody going to pay for a can of beer or a 6-pack of beer? So that has a disproportionate impact on small businesses. Supply chains. Small businesses have supply chains. That's so important, right? Again, we're talking about that certainty. And they're not able, they don't have the resources, they don't have the capabilities necessarily to just shift on a dime to new vendors. It's not that easy, right? Sometimes they can't find vendors around them that can produce or deliver what they need. And they don't have entire departments out there looking for new vendors. So there's so many different ways. I could go on and on. I could talk about the fact that small businesses can't stockpile goods right now. You know, waiting for what tariffs may or may not be, like larger corporations can. And of course, again, that shifting landscape, right, really puts small businesses in this box. Should I change? Should I shift vendors? Should I do something different? Should I stop exporting and try to focus more on, you know, producing and supplying products in the country when we don't know if in 2 weeks trade policy is going to be different and there's a complete lack of transparency as to what's going on. So businesses feel in the dark.
And there's not enough time to shift, you know, and a lot of people have been dealing with, a friend of mine works with Chinese factories, said he anticipated this, started working with some Vietnamese factories, and he goes, they're just not the same. They're not as fast, they're not as efficient. So it's hurting them as well. Okay, Eric, back to you. I know consumer confidence is slumping. I saw some number yesterday. Given all this turbulence, is the same happening to confidence among small business owners?
Yeah, I mean, as Elliot really eloquently pointed out, you know, when you think about small businesses, it all does come down to how they feel about the future, right? And the confidence that they have that things will be predictable in the future. And we ran a survey back in January to sort of gauge with the new administration coming in, how optimistic were you about 2025 being a great year? And it turned out at the time, 62% were highly optimistic that 2025 was going to be a good year. Well, now fast forward to today, and it's completely flipped. 61% are now pessimistic about the outcome for 2025. So it's clear business owners are feeling overwhelmed and at the same time underinformed about what's going on. And the pulse that we're seeing is clear. Business owners urgently need more stability and support to regain confidence going forward that they can actually do a good job of generating revenue this year. And right now, there's just no stability. And the information coming out is like literally, it depends on what side someone rolls out of bed in the morning in terms of how we're making decisions for how we're going to run this country.
Yeah. So, Elliot, do you believe policymakers understand the effect tariffs have on small businesses, or is this still flying under the radar in Washington and state legislatures?
I want to answer that, but Riva, I just want to piggyback on what Eric said because it's a really important point about consumer confidence. That's another thing small business owners are looking at very closely. right? Because if consumers don't feel good right now, they are going to be inclined to spend less money. And they're going to be inclined perhaps not to go out to eat when in the past they might have felt better about that, right? Is that going to impact their travel plans as they go into the summer? So I think Eric's point is really, really important. Consumer confidence is also a big deal for small businesses. Definitely not flying under the radar. This is an issue that's going to impact everybody, right? People are going to feel this in their pocketbooks, whether you're a consumer, whether you're somebody who's relying on their 401k and you see what's going on with the market and you're concerned about the shifts and the impact this has had on the market, whether you have a 529 and you're getting ready to put your kid through college, whether you're a small business owner, people are really anxious about these tariffs and especially not knowing where they're going to land. I think they're hearing that in Washington. I think you're seeing a ton of coverage on most news stations about what's going on here. So I don't think it's flying under the radar. The question is, what are politicians going to do when they hear this anxiety and this concern from their constituents?
So, Elliot, a follow-up question. How can small business owners make their voices heard more effectively? Because I think still big business captures the ear of people in Congress. So what's an effective way? I mean, there's a lot of marching in the streets right now, but that's sort of more on a citizen level. How can small businesses specifically let Washington know how much they're hurting?
Well, let's start by make your voice heard, right? But I want to do it in a more holistic level than just calling your congressperson or your senator. Okay. The impact of tariffs will filter down to every politician from a local level to the state level. If things are not going well in the economy, if there's concern about the economy, that's going to impact politicians that serve communities across the nation. I think people need to contact their alder people if they have alder people. I think they have to contact their city council members. I think they have to contact their state legislators. I think they have to contact their county legislators. I think they have to contact their Congress people, right? Maybe get a list. You can do it all in 10 minutes, right? Make phone calls and let everybody know this is of concern. And I think the messaging should be nonpartisan. The SBAC is a stringently nonpartisan organization. And I think what you see across the board is that the concern about tariffs is not a partisan issue. If you own a business, right, these tariffs are going to impact you, whether you lean Republican, whether you lean Democrat, or whether you lean in some other direction or are completely apolitical, right? So let people know this is a business issue. And finally, Riva, if you got a story to tell, tell your story. Let politicians know, hey, this is how tariffs are going to impact my shoe store. This is how the costs of food going up is going to impact my restaurant. And that, I think, can be very powerful and build, I think, on what is momentum right now to try to really put some guardrails around these policies and create certainty.
I know my niece started interning at my congressman's office, actually. And her first week, she said the phones just didn't stop ringing. People were calling in. And now she said the congressman is specifically asking for stories from the district, from small business owners, so he can amplify that to other people, which I think is it's really important. So now my question, I have a question for both of you guys. So I'm going to start with you, Eric, if you could start us off. What do you think is the long-term economic risk to local economies and communities if small businesses continue to face these unstable tariff conditions?
Yeah, well, let me jump onto that in just one second. I think one thing I wanted to add to Elliot is like there are other ways to continue to amplify your voice. Going directly to people in political power is one. But I also think right now these stories are being told in the press, right? And so contact your local media outlet, your local news station, and tell them that you have an interesting story to be told, because there you get the amplification across an entire community. And I think communities, and we saw in COVID, communities are clear for any type of economic or environmental disaster that happens. The communities that come together the strongest are the ones that actually survive and thrive and are reborn in many ways. So in terms of the local economy impact, we track small business sentiment regularly, not only through our polls that we're running, but also through the wide variety of discussion posts in our various groups made by our members. And across the board, we're seeing warning signs flashing. The ongoing tariff instability, as we mentioned earlier, is causing people to pause hiring, cut back on growth, and delay investments that they're making. And all of that works to weaken a local economy over time. And local economies were starting to rebound after COVID. And what happened is now this new uncertainty has caused them to be put into another position of trying to recover. And ultimately, what this means is that we're going to start to see more empty storefronts. And that will hurt the entire community. Because if you think about the small business economy, it's an ecosystem, right? You have the businesses on Main Street, and then you have the businesses around that community that support or thrive off of that community. So when you see a retail business that goes out of business, you have to think about, well, that business had a marketing agency. They were spending on advertising. They were working with a local accountant. They have a local attorney that they've been working with. And all of those people have now lost that sense of income. And so, it really, during COVID, we really tried to push people to think about acting and supporting local business. But now more than ever, we have to do it again. We need to start investing and spending our money locally, because when you spend money locally, it recirculates within your economy, right? If you spend money and by going and buying stuff on Amazon, it goes out to Amazon. And they can use it to fly to the moon or whatever they're doing these days. But it doesn't stay in your community, right? It doesn't support the local economy. And that's what we need to get back to. And that's how many of these communities survived through COVID. And it's how they're going to survive through this time as well.
Yeah, I find that to be really true. Elliot, what about you? What do you think the long-term economic impact is?
Well, I mean, let's start with jobs. If small businesses feel uncertain, and I know we're using that word uncertainty a lot, right? But it's a very, very important word right now. Small businesses that are concerned about what their economic future are going to look like are far less likely to hire people. I mean, to me, from what I've seen, it's just that simple. Right. So, the first thing that these tariffs can do is really create job losses, which is unfortunate. They're going to create job losses probably in businesses both large and small. And the longer this goes on, I fear the more people are going to lose their jobs. It's not good for business. Secondly, local communities, to Eric's point, rely on local spending, and that's sales tax revenue. That's income tax revenue when people have jobs. And what these tariffs threaten to do is to really drain local communities of a tax base that they need, that they've been relying upon. And it's happening so fast. In just, it seems like years, but I think it's been like 2 or 3 months, right? Since all of this has started, you're seeing it does seem like years. You're seeing a dramatic change in people's behaviors, right? So if consumers spend less money, if small businesses feel they need to cut now to prepare for tariffs in the future, or the tariffs that are already in place remaining in place, that is going to impact the economies of local communities. So I think those are two things that are really important, but it's also the long-term impact. So if businesses were really feeling good about growing, if they had plans, if they were going to take that neighboring storefront that might be vacant and think about expanding into that storefront. The question is, let's say everything changes in the most positive way. Are they going to want to take that risk again? That's the question. And that's my concern, is that's a long-term effect of this tariff situation, because again, it's not something that's happening with small businesses. It's something that's happening to small businesses. It's not a bad move by a small business that's causing a loss of revenue or having to pay more for product. It's something that's happening to them. And when things happen to you, you take a pause and you think, what should my next move be?
Exact from the consumer point of view, um, this is uh, this is what happens if you have, let's say, $50 to spend, and you're going to spend it. You originally planned to spend it on buying 3 products, but now you can only afford 2 of those products. Some business is going to lose out all of that revenue, and that is
Mhm.
that's pretty scary. Okay, so we're gonna pivot now a little to how to navigate the storm. What smart pivots can business owners make? So, given what you both just shared, let's shift that discussion to what advice do you have for small business owners going through this challenging period? Like I said, I've talked to so many who liken this to the early stages of COVID, as you've mentioned, Eric, where they have to protect themselves and their businesses, and they're not entirely sure how to do that. So, Eric, what do you think small business owners can do now to protect themselves and adapt?
That's a great question. And I think the best thing to do is to kind of look back in time and say what has worked before. Right. And prior to COVID, we were actually doing a whole bunch of research because FEMA had created a framework for how do you recover from a environmental or a weather related emergency, right? A hurricane, a tornado, or whatever, and how the communities actually come together and recover. And so, there's sort of some templates for how you actually have to operate to recover. And then, during COVID, we use those same frameworks to kind of come up with a new template, if you will, for recovering from a pandemic. Well, it's the same thing that we're trying to do here. It's just it's kind of like when we had the savings and loan crisis a long time ago and the economy got turned upside down on its head, or the mortgage-backed security crisis, right? All of these crises basically help us understand how to move forward. And so in this one specifically, I think one of the most important things to do is to understand your supply chain, right? Where is it coming from? And not only are your materials coming from, but where are those materials made that then come that you purchase, right? Because that has the ability to increase your overall expenses and decrease your margins. So really being a good student of where that stuff's coming from and trying to figure out where else you can source that from at any given point in time. Now, that's easier for some businesses than others. There's definitely lead times that they have to be thinking about. And that kind of takes me to the second point, which is really streamlining your operations and reforecasting, understanding your financial drivers so you know where you have flexibility, because that flexibility is key. Sometimes that's really challenging for businesses that purchase product now for back to school sales that they're going to be doing in September, right? Because that stuff was manufactured, has to get on a boat, comes to the United States, and all of a sudden there could be a tariff whacked on that when you go to actually get it off the boat, right? And so it's not easy, but the more you can kind of pre-wire to understand where stuff's coming from and be flexible on when you buy it, the more that gives you control to a certain extent over your cash flow. Then the next area is to really double down on your existing customers. With those relationships, communicate with your customers, help them understand how you're trying to navigate uncertainty and how much you appreciate their business and sticking with you. Because we all have an emotional attachment, especially to the local business owners in our community, and want to help them be successful. And finally, I'd say, the one thing, if you go back to the FEMA framework or you go back to what we found in COVID, is your community matters. Community connections are key. So focusing on building those relationships, whether they're online or offline, is really important. Just like during COVID, the businesses that stayed visible and supportive were the ones that came out stronger ultimately at the end. And what we're seeing within our community is that happening, right? Businesses are sharing and really helping each other. And it's really clear that resilience comes from adaptability and this sense of community coming together in order to achieve the outcome that we all want, which is to get to the other side.
Yeah, it's so true. So, Elliot, how do you think small businesses can prepare for the impact and uncertainty around tariffs? How can platforms like the SBAC, Alignable, and other local business organizations help businesses navigate these kinds of policy shifts?
I think Eric said it really well. He talked about diversification of supply chains. He talked about a lot of ways that businesses can pivot right now, and I think a lot of them are already doing it. I think a lot of businesses are looking at how to hedge, what should come, quote unquote, off the menu and stay on the menu. What's going to happen if exports really dampen their ability to make a profit. So, and I think Eric's going to talk about how an incredible platform like Alignable can help connect people together. And build this community where people can share best practices. Maybe they can share overstocked inventory, different things like that. And I'll let Eric cover that. I'm a policy wonk, so I'm going to talk about it from a policy perspective. Okay, so everybody stay with me. Eric brought up FEMA, and let's talk about the SBA as well, which we know is in a transition right now, the Small Business Administration, and disaster loans, right? So in the past, when you've had a very traumatic event, and I would say the imposition and uncertainty around tariffs is traumatic for many small businesses, maybe not all, but many small businesses, there's been programs that have been set up. There's been the government coming in and saying, hey, you face this natural disaster. We all know about the support, the strong support that was given during COVID. Here's how we can help you make it through this uncertainty and this really dramatic, quick shift in your business because of external forces. I'm not aware of anything like that right now, right? So what I'm aware of is costs going dramatically up, a high degree of uncertainty, a lack of transparency, a ton of anxiety, but no help. Okay. So I think you could, if you're interested in advocacy, you might want to start with your state government, right? And say, look, here's what's happening federally, but can we get some tax credits for small businesses? In a lot of places, tax credits go primarily to very large corporations, right? But can we get some tax credits to small businesses that perhaps want to hire despite these economic headwinds? The SBAC is pushing for that in Illinois right now. Are there bridge loan programs that state governments or local governments or county governments can lean into to help businesses bridge the gap until such time as this tariff these tariff policies sort of get baked in the cake and people know what to expect and know exactly how to pivot? Because it's tough to know how to pivot when you don't know where you're pivoting to, right? Are there other things state governments, local governments, and certainly the federal government, if people push our Congress folks, can do to help small businesses again, so they shouldn't be a casualty in a trade war? And I think that's a good line to say to your politicians, right? We should go out of business because of something that we have no control over, that doesn't seem to make a ton of sense to us, that's just going to deeply impact our businesses. So I love to talk about advocacy. I'm always glad to talk about what we're trying to do here in Illinois, to try to sort of push the envelope as it pertains to helping small businesses, especially during a very critical time like this. And I'll just close this answer by saying, I don't think we can underscore the impact this is having on a lot of small businesses. And we need our local governments and the federal government, if these tariffs are going to come into place, to provide some sort of relief to help businesses through.
Right. But so far, like during COVID, we had PPP loans and those kind of things. So far, I've heard absolutely nothing at all about this, which actually scares me a little bit. So we're going to talk about technology right now. Eric, obviously technology and networking are your bread and butter here. So how can ramping up activity on Alignable or other networks like the Chambers of Commerce help small businesses survive and maybe even thrive?
Yeah, I'm gonna get to that in just a second, but I wanted to kind of build on something Elliot said, because it literally just like there's that old saying, when the good Lord closes the door, he opens a window. I think that was a really eloquently said statement about, the federal door in many ways has been closed to small businesses, but opening a window locally may be the only answer to this, because people feel that they can't push back nationally. What they can do is they can go and talk to their local representatives and really work that angle to open a window. And it's going to have to be the states that are going to be doing the best here are the ones where the states realize they have to step in. They actually have to play the person or the entity that actually supports small business during this crisis. And Elliot, that was a really great point that you made, and I didn't want to let that go by without at least jumping on it. So let's talk a little bit about networking. We know that when disruptions hit, business owners don't just need grit to survive; they need people. And at Alignable, we're really focused on helping our members understand and tap into what we call the second degree of their network. So we call it their second circle, if you will. And by business owners telling us the types of people that they need to meet, they want to meet, we're then able to use our AI-powered system to kind of surface these people within their second degree connections within their network. So effectively, I can look through Elliot to his network using our platform to see who he knows that I need to meet. And then I can work with Elliot to build a relationship where I'm like, hey, could you introduce me to Riva? Because I really need to get to her as a supplier, as a customer, as a partner. And one of the things that's really cool about Alignable is this ability to see into the second degree and literally go searching for the people that you need most and understand which relationships you have are the ones that you need to invest time in to gain access to those people. Because word of mouth referrals is the strongest bond that business owners have available to them. They just sometimes don't know where the mouth is or where the recipient is of those words, and they need to find a path. And so finding that path is how we're helping businesses, and it's also how people like the chamber, by going to a networking event. And so it's really, now's the time to show up, build partnerships, collaborate, and the businesses that lean in on their networks will now be the ones that'll have the greatest potential going forward, because they'll have the resources at their fingertips. And whether that resource is Elliot's organization that you can tap into through Elliot, or it's a business owner that happens to know a supplier who knows a supplier who you can get access to, it's all within your network. Every connection you make has value, and you need to understand what that value is to be successful in these days going forward.
Thanks, Eric. Before we move ahead, Elliot, I want to go back to what we just talked about, you being the policy wonk. Are there certain states right now that are more open, that are sort of in the position that they understand what's going on and are trying to help their small business owners in their state?
Riva, I think it's happened very, very quickly. So this is something we're going to monitor. I know what we're doing in Illinois is, truthfully, a lot of the things we're pushing for, there's more justification for them now. Things like occupational licensing reform, things like tax credits for small businesses, really small businesses that are going to need help right now to make it through this. We're going to be monitoring what other states do. Well, certainly sharing that with Eric and the folks at Alignable. We've got a great team that looks, most of our best policies do come from looking at what other people do. And how they are able to stimulate their economy. So I don't know yet, but we're going to keep our eye on it for sure. I'd also like to piggyback on something that Eric said, because that last answer about how to use platforms like Alignable and chambers of commerce to really build your networks and help yourselves, businesses, through this is so important. I don't think there's ever been a more critical time for businesses to collaborate through platforms like Alignable. right? In various different ways, because we sort of have to come together at this point and say, okay, I don't think it's far fetched for one business owner to say, do you have some extra inventory right now? Right. Where are some businesses shifting and other businesses pivoting where they can come together and share resources and insight? Hey, who's your new supplier? What are you doing right now? Are you thinking about making a move? I think it's really important because we know, as I mentioned earlier, a business owner, I mean, you might wake up at 6 a.m. and work until 8 o'clock at night, running your business. And then, you got your family, and it's tough to do all of this on your own. So I would say leverage these networks, leverage these platforms, because this collaboration could be key. And hopefully at some point, this tariff chaos will be in the rearview mirror, but these strong bonds that people create may actually provide opportunities in the future.
If I could think back to what happened during COVID, a lot of storefront owners talk to their landlords and, express, we're in trouble. And obviously the landlord is going to be aware of why. And maybe you can negotiate on rent and talk to some of your suppliers and that kind of thing, where you rely on other people in your community. And I want to reemphasize what both of you said about local, because I can remember right after COVID I live in California, but I'm a native New Yorker. And I went home and my sister was driving me through New York City, and all the empty storefronts and small that obviously had been occupied by a lot of small businesses. And I know a lot of local governments don't want that to happen again. So they want to work with you to prevent that kind of thing from devastating their cities. I mean, it's going to affect the city as well in terms of income tax, what they're going to collect and what they can now reinvest in the community. So squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? So
Absolutely.
so I want to thank both of you for the terrific advice that you've shared with small business owners who are going through these unpredictable times. So we have some time here. So we're going to talk to some questions that the audience has posted, and I've been seeing them come through, and there's a bunch. So that's kind of exciting. Either one of you or both can handle either question, any question. So first, are there certain industries or areas that are getting hit harder by tariffs today?
You want me to take that one?
Yeah, go. You can start.
You can pile on. Well, clearly, there are definitely industries that it's not hard to really fathom how they're getting hit, right? I mean, if you look about a retail business and the goods that they're selling, and you sort of track it back to like, where are those goods coming from? There are certainly retail businesses where none of the things that they're selling are actually made in the United States. And so pretty much everything in their inventory is subject to one of these tariffs, depending on what country seems to be out of favor at any given point in time, right? But it goes much deeper than that. Yeah, I was telling the folks here that I live close to the Atlantic Ocean, and I saw a commercial fishing vessel go by right before we were getting ready for this event. And I kind of went to ChatGPT and I said, like, help me understand, like, what % of that fisherman's expenditures are non-US products. And it came back that the range is somewhere between 30 and 50% of what they purchase, whether it's a net that comes from Asia, a part for their engine that comes from Japan, different types of their radar systems come from Europe, right? 30 to 40 to 50% of that person's expenses. So when you go to buy fish at the local store and you're wondering why the price went up, you have to be able to draw the correlation between that fish from that boat and what that person is spending. And so sometimes it's a little bit more obvious than other times in terms of where, 90% of what I'm buying at this store is from China or wherever. totally obvious. But sometimes you have to look deeper to realize how intertwined the international economy really is and how supportive of it is for business across the globe, and realize that pretty much everything you're buying has some significant amount of product materials, raw materials. They were talking about the fiberglass used in boats. While it may be put together in the United States, it's coming from overseas. So that'll give you a little bit of perspective from my thought process about, like, how do you think about where it's going to impact and how it's going to impact your daily life?
Yeah, and that was well said, and I'll add to it, Eric. I mean, you know, if you walk down a commercial corridor and you see restaurants and you see retail and any other type of shops that you love to frequent, I mean, I bet that just about every one of those storefronts has multiple things that are imported from another country, whether or not it's the whole or it's a part of the whole that's being sold. So, you know, when you say, or when the question is what industries are going to be impacted, a lot of them, right? And even service providers, the folks that provide services to the people that make things.
Yeah.
I mean, if the people that make things have less money to spend, I think Eric touched on this at the very beginning of this webinar, they're going to have less money to spend on folks who do marketing. They're going to have less money to spend on people who perform professional services. So, you know, it's tough to pinpoint. You could say home builders because of the price of steel and aluminum and various different things. And you could say restaurants because we don't know what's going to happen with the imports of certain food. But it's really going to have a far-reaching impact.
Yeah, I think I think it's going to touch every industry. I can't think of an industry that, you know, other than maybe babysitting or something, that it's not gonna impact. So this is kind of a specific question. If we book shipments before the new tariffs, but they're arriving after, is there anything we can do to avoid or reduce the extra cost? I don't think there is, but you guys are smarter than me, so.
I wouldn't go ahead, Eric.
No, that one's a tough one.
Yeah, I was gonna say I was trying to punt it to Eric. You know, and certainly I don't know that we're smarter than you, Riva. But the short answer is I don't know. I mean, I think again the uncertainty around tariffs. You read about people and you talk to folks who feel like they're already paying increased tariffs right now, right? When they're importing, especially from China. And then you hear about looming tariffs, and that I think is part of the problem. So you're not getting an answer to your question, and I apologize for that. But what you are getting is sort of like the issue is the uncertainty around it and who's being tariffed what and how that's all going to work. I mean, I don't think people understand it. And I wish I could give you a better answer than that, but I can't.
So
And I guess the one thing that I would add to that, Riva, is if you have certainty, you can navigate, right? When you don't have certainty, it becomes very difficult to navigate. So, for example, if we were just going after China with these tariffs and we were like, okay, China is the place that we're going to whack with tariffs, and you knew that was going to remain constant, then you could do things to take your product from China, ship it to another country, have it partially assembled in that other country, put it on a boat and ship it over. But the problem is you don't know if tomorrow that other country is going to be hit with an even higher tariff, right? And so with uncertainty comes the no ability to really adjust the way that you are operating your business, sort of literally like you know there's not going to be a tariff this week, which, you know, I beg to question whether you can do that or not, and saying, all right, let's change the way we're shipping something, right? Let's get it here. Let's pay the extra to get it here now to lock in my price, because 2 weeks from now, I'm not certain what the price is going to be. But then, you know, that can become enormously expensive for certain products and services. So, you know, until we get some stability and understand exactly what the policies are going to be, it's going to be very difficult to navigate this.
I know that several of the entrepreneurs that I interviewed for this article I'm going to be doing for allbusiness.com told me that they told their factories to hold, they've already manufactured the goods, but they've told the factories in China, hold, don't ship, because, you know, one guy, actually a good friend of mine sells kind of like inexpensive fun sunglasses, and his retail point for years has been $14. The last batch he had to sell for to the consumer for 24 because it was already, so that's a huge difference for, you know, that kind of item. And he's the one, he also told me, I told my factory, don't ship me anything. And I'm trying to get my Vietnamese factory to kind of bump up production. So is there anything that small business owners can actually push for policy-wise, Elliot, to make this easier on us long term? I think they're looking for the specifics to talk to their representatives about.
Well, so on a federal level, one of the things I would push for is, look, what sort of legislation is going to come out? What's on your mind to the legislators? What are you going to do for us to help small businesses that cannot necessarily weather the storm, make it through until these tariff policies are baked out? I mean, I think today I just looked at my phone. I mean, I think even the automobile tariff situation right now has shifted this morning, right? So when it's shifting every day, you know, look, I think at the end of the day, it's going to get settled. All right. And I think that the pressure that people are putting on their legislators matter. And I think it's going to help lead to a better result than what we were looking at before, right? But I'm very interested to know what federal legislators are going to do. Are they going to stand up a loan program? I mean, certainly not PPP, but something else that help business owners that are being devastated by tariffs make it through. I mean, you talk about a $22 pair of sunglasses as opposed to a $14 pair of sunglasses. Well, a lot of people aren't going to buy those $22 pairs of sunglasses. On a state level, I think state legislators, county legislators, cities, they all put together programs during COVID. Some of them were loan programs. Some of them were tax incentive programs. Some of them were grant programs, right? Back to business grants, things like that, things to provide income to businesses to offset the income they're going to lose because of tariffs, right? Paying higher prices, trying to negotiate with suppliers that might not be that willing to negotiate with them because, you know, small businesses are going to lose a ton of leverage right now if they have to only look at a certain number of suppliers. So I like the idea of tax credit legislation for businesses that need a bridge until this is sorted out. I like the idea of loans. As I said before, short-term low interest bridge loans, right, to small business owners that can be backstopped by states that want to help their businesses make it through this crisis. And I would say it's becoming a crisis. I think grants, which are not difficult to navigate. So you gotta, you know, there's grants, and then there's like, you know, can you make a grant easy, right, to offset lost income because of tariffs? That becomes a little bit more complicated. Tax credits are a lot easier than grants. But these are conversations, I think, that need to happen with local politicians. I mean, Eric made that point. He's like, I think you did, Eric. Yeah, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but, you know, like, go to your local folks. That window is open, right? And say, how are you going to help your businesses through the tariff situation? Because, again, the concern is nonpartisan. And legislators from both sides of the aisle should understand the impact tariffs are going to have on their small businesses, their farmers, and everybody that relies on a thriving economy.
So the next question, I think we answered a lot of parts of it. But one part is there any way to apply for an exemption? Do you know that, Elliot? Are there exemptions available? I'm not aware of any, but.
All I know is, I mean, I think there's industries that are looking for exemptions. I have not heard of a business. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist, right?
Right.
But I have not heard of, so don't take this one to the proverbial bank, okay? Check it out. But I haven't heard of a business being able to say, hey, I would like to be exempt from a particular tariff.
Yeah, I don't think that that's in the works right now anyway. Eric, this one seems like just custom made for you. Is there anything that we as small business owners in aggregate can do? Like what can like alignable groups, what do you recommend that they do to push for help um, on the tariff issue?
Um, well, I think that, as my economics professor once said, is like, one person, one toilet doesn't get the landowner's attention, but if you have everybody flush at the same time, it certainly does. It blows up the plumbing. You need to have a collective voice. And, reading the tea leaves of what's happening federally versus locally, I mean, we're going to have to advocate for stability at the federal level. I don't think we're going to see much in the way of support coming for business owners coming at the federal level. So band together, advocate for stability, and like let's get some like consistent approaches to solving the economic problems at the national level, and band together and look for relief locally. And so I would say, talking to your local governors, your local representatives, and saying, look, clearly support like the PPP loans is not coming out of Washington. I mean, the SBA was just handed all of the student loans in addition to the SBA business, right? They're not going to be seeing a way clear to doing anything significant. You're going to have to look for relief locally. And this is an opportunity really for governors and state senators to really step up and say, our state's going to be the state that actually helps small businesses survive because we're helping the American dream come true for the people in our state. And it's going to have to happen at the local and statewide level, and provinces as well. So, I think that's the way that I would look at it, in terms of where to focus.
And also, I would say, I think to take the question towards as well, how can you leverage a platform like Alignable, right? To really help navigate one's way through this crisis. What I would, and again, I think it's a crisis for a lot of small businesses right now. What I would do is collaborate on that platform, right? Collaborate amongst your local communities. Find out who is sharing your pain right now and what they're doing about it, right? What's their particular, is there an exemption, right? Something great to put out to the community. What are folks doing in a particular industry who are worried about getting a particular product? Where are they pivoting? Well, I mean, I don't know, the number escapes me. I think you've got some insane number of folks on Alignable, right? I mean, you've got people that might be able to weigh in and say, hey, here's how I'm pivoting, right? You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Here's what I'm doing. And I would leverage that as well, because one great piece of advice from one business owner on a platform like Alignable may save you an awful lot of money and resources and time trying to figure something out yourself.
Well said, Elliot.
Yeah.
I guess I should send me a bill for that. That was awesome. Yeah, I mean, when COVID hit, I mean, thank you. I mean, when COVID hit, the reason that groups and events exist on the platform was that when COVID hit, a bunch of florists went to my co-founder and said, we need to talk to each other. We need to figure some stuff out. And we literally created a group, put every florist of the 9.5 million businesses that are on the platform. There are a lot of florists. We put them all into one group and we're like, talk to each other. And it blew up. And we're like, holy cow, we should do this for others. So now there's literally thousands of groups across the platform, every industry, every like, oh, I'm interested in overseas trade. There's probably a group for that. There's a group for veteran business owners, right? You can find your people and talk to each other in a way that you never could before. And I think that is one of the ways that the community comes together and morphs and goes, hey, what if we just did this? Could we reroute all of it? Could we purchase together? and then get it to the United States and then reroute it to everybody. I mean, there's all kinds of creative, small business owners are entrepreneurs. They are creative. They will find a way if they can work together. So take advantage of it and work together to resolve problems, and you will find a path through this. I'm confident. We've done it before. We'll do it again.
Well, one of the things that perhaps you can look for, the businesses for sale market is churning pretty rapidly, is if there are businesses in your area or in your industry that you know of because you're in an industry group that are planning on liquidating and going out of business. A lot of baby boomers are like, we're done. The silver tsunami, I think they're calling it. You can contact them. Maybe they have excess inventory that they were going to sell, to somebody else to offload, and here you are. You can take possession of that inventory. I think that you have to be extra, I don't want to say creative, but you have to be a little bit extra resourceful, I think, to get through times like this. So we are basically out of time. Thank you everyone for the questions you sent in. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of them. And so we only have about 2 minutes left. I want to ask Eric and Elliot, what's one practical move that every small business owner should consider making this month? Eric?
Well, we know firsthand that uncertainty is growing, but so is the opportunity for smart, connected, entrepreneurial business owners to rise above it. So diversify, strengthen your customer relationships, and lean hard into your networks, both online and offline. And if you do that, if you lean hard into your networks, you're going to find the people that will help you not only survive, but thrive. So that would be my message.
Okay, Elliot?
Yeah, make your voice heard. You would be surprised. I was when I started, when I co-founded the SBAC, I just had no idea how much one call, one email to a local legislator, even to a congressperson, really made a difference. So if this month everybody who's listening to this and other small business owners just contacted their local politicians, their state politicians, their congressperson, and their senator, their governor, right? I mean, 5 calls, maybe 6. You probably will talk to somebody at their office, but they're going to hear what you say. And if the message is, look, I'm a small business owner, or I support the small business community, we need certainty. We need to put guardrails around this tariff policy. Small business cannot absorb higher tariffs in the way that this is happening. Now, whatever message you want to send, and if you got a story, tell that story for sure, because legislators and politicians will hear those stories and it will make a difference. So, I firmly believe in small businesses. I firmly believe we're going to come out of this tariff situation, and folks are going to rebound, and there is going to be a light at the end of this tunnel. But we have to push politicians to get us out of this tunnel as quickly as possible for the sake of small businesses, local communities, and our economy.
Well said. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, taking an hour out of your day. I hope you found it as informative as I did. I learned a lot listening to Eric and Elliot. I want to thank you guys for your expert advice. Like I said, I learned a tremendous amount. I agree with, join groups. That's really the best thing that you can do, and call your legislature. Brittany, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Riva. And thank you, Eric and Elliot, for that amazing discussion. So as you can see on the screen here, we have just a few final thoughts for you before we wrap up. And first and foremost, we appreciate you for taking the time out to join us today for this discussion. And as a thank you, we're going to offer you 20% off an Alignable membership. Now more than ever, it's time to nurture your network in ways during these challenging times, and we want to help. You can get started by scanning that QR code, but if you have any issues with that, don't worry, we're going to send you that offer in a follow-up email after today. We also have a link going into the chat right now for the SBAC. Great resources, great information. Again, we will add that to that post-event email if you're not able to grab it in the chat. And finally, Eric mentioned it, Elliot talked about it as well. Now more than ever, lean into your network and lean into that second degree circle that we were talking about. Next week, we are celebrating National Small Business Week, and we are going to have events all week long where you're going to get the opportunity to connect with the people that you need to meet in order to help your business thrive. So we will be dropping a link in the chat for that. And again, sending that out today with the recording and all those other resources. Thank you so much for joining, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Riva. Thank you, Eric.